Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. Today's episode is part of a special series called Making a Difference, Supply Chains for a Better Tomorrow. Now, the current COVID-19 pandemic is creating many challenges for companies and organizations around the world, but it's also a catalyst for change and innovation. So what supply chain capabilities will separate the leaders from the laggards, not only in response to this current crisis, but in order to succeed in the years to come? Well, that's the main focus of the series. And, it's great to have the following folks to join us in this conversation today. We've got Greg Ackner, who is VP at Capital Logistics. We've got Jay Gustafson, who is Senior VP Marketplace Solutions at Echo Global Logistics. And then we've got Dan Cicerchi, who's VP and General Manager, Transportation Management at Descartes. And it's great to have them on the program to share their experiences and their perspectives on this topic. So again, I want to thank them all for joining us today. And we're just going to go right into the conversation. And Greg and Jay, I'll start with you guys, and maybe Greg, you can go first. I mean, over the years, we've talked a lot about the importance of agility and flexibility and responsiveness in supply chain management. And those capabilities are even more critical today as companies are trying to navigate through this COVID-19, crisis. And in many cases, they're kind of leaning and relying on the logistics service providers to help them. Can you share some examples of what you and your customers are experiencing at the moment?
Sure. Thanks for having me. A couple things that we're seeing out there, we work pretty heavily in the food and beverage, and, you see, especially in the beginning of the COVID quarantine, you see a big spike in demand, then you see the come off, then it starts to build up again to what we're deeming as more of the essential products that are really being shipped as the non-essential businesses are closed, and how these changes are taking place. So you see, for example, we do business with a really large national retail grocer. We're doing 2 or 3 truckloads of milk a week to their distribution centers on the East Coast. And all of a sudden on a dime, it turns, they say, we need 40, 45 trucks. So, having the technology, the ability to process that rapidly, and also get that news out to our business partners, our marketplace, where we need the help, where this customer needs the help, staying on the forefront technologically, using Aljex, using, MacroPoint, making sure that everything is in place, running smoothly, and having that ready to go to be able to make these changes. Another thing with our people working at home, it made it a lot simpler being cloud-based. So being on the forefront of that technologically and being able to use those tools was a really big help.
That's what you just described, that huge spike in demand, in that grocery, sector. I mean, I think that's one of the things that we're seeing, that either it's been this, huge uptick in demand and having to respond to that, or there are other cases where it's basically everything's shut down, and then how do you respond to that, right? And how do you become, more efficient in an environment where, a lot of your business has come down. Now, I know, I think I saw a press release or something to the effect of you guys also participated in something called the Million Gallons Challenge. Can you talk a little bit about that, what that is?
So it was kind of a local food bank program. They're putting together. The short of it is that one of the food banks got the local kitchen, some chefs, some restaurateurs, got them all together, putting 1 million gallons of soup together to donate to local charities, for the need in lower Westchester County here in New York. And we got involved. We partnered up with one of our regular carriers, one of our partners that we use, on a daily basis for warehousing, trucking, all that type of stuff. He has these portable converted shipping containers that are converted into cold storage facilities, frozen and fresh temperature. So we were able to partner with them to get them donated to this 1 million gallon challenge, to put them on site. So they had the space, prior to which there was no way they were storing that much of this product. So we were able to get it on the ground pretty rapidly within, I think the turnaround time is about 12 hours from when they asked. They were on site.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it goes with again the theme of the series, making a difference, because I think that's the other thing that we're seeing here is the logistics community really coming together, because you are the connective tissue, if you will, of getting product out there, whether it's to the supermarkets, whether it's to the the first responders or people in the front lines and so forth. So I think that's a great example there. So Jay, over to you now. I know you've done some similar things as well. Can you share a little bit about, how this current environment is impacting you and your customers, and give some examples there?
Yeah, no, again, and Adrian, thanks for having us on today. As I think back to like the early days of the COVID pandemic becoming a reality, I was really proud of how Echo reacted to both keep the safety of our employees in mind and getting them all home, very quickly. We operate off of cloud-based software also. So for us, the systems were already in place. It was more the logistics around getting the hardware to our employees' homes to allow them to be successful. So while all of that was going on, we saw the surge in demand across the grocery and certain segments of consumer goods, really surging. So there was a lot of, moving pieces taking place in that mid-March timeframe, and our ability to be flexible and act with a sense of urgency to keep our employees, our carriers, and our clients, all top of mind, really made me proud as a leader, at Echo, and it allowed us to be super successful in terms of how we've performed both in the immediate days after the pandemic and how we've continued to support our carrier and client partners, for the last 10 weeks now. It's crazy.
Yeah, I think, both of you really kind of showcase the reality that, not only have your customers had to be responsive, agile, and, in responding to this crisis, you yourselves as the logistics partners have had to also be responsive, agile, and be responsive because, you're an extension of their, of their staff. Now, I know for you at Echo, I mean, some of your clients, you've done some things with some of your clients as well. I know I saw some, I think, press releases as well in terms of kind of the changes that your customers had to go through. I think it was Everblock Systems and Blinking Owl. Can you just briefly share what those case studies were?
Yeah, as I think back the last 2 months, there's very few industries or customers that were operating in a business as usual environment. So we saw many shifts in demand patterns from the clients that we worked with, both from a geographical standpoint where we had to pivot and reposition equipment to help them with surges in volumes out of certain areas of the country. And then we actually saw clients pivot their business models in certain ways to accommodate the new reality of, a post-pandemic America. So 2 examples of that would be a customer that we work with out of California called Owl Distillery. They're a producer of, artesian craft liquor, and they pivoted their business model to start creating hand sanitizer and created we helped them create a local distribution model where instead of, sending, bottles of liquor to different wholesalers throughout the Western 11, they were beginning to provide hand sanitizer and other protective equipment or, liquid to hospitals and other frontline responders. Another one that I thought was a really cool situation was we have a customer called Everblock that makes modular building systems. And as the mayors throughout the United States started to think and plan ahead of how they were going to handle surges in cases related to the COVID pandemic, we helped them set up 2,000 pop-up beds in New Orleans. We organized 35 truckload shipments over, I think, a week time span. Each of those required team drivers, consistent visibility from an electronic tracking standpoint, and we were able to help them get the materials to New Orleans to quickly set up this, hospital. So we've, each week is a little bit different. Right now, we're seeing clients' business patterns, shift, but as certain industries, see declines in demand, we're seeing surges in other areas of other verticals throughout the United States.
Yeah, no, those are great examples. I mean, you're seeing companies having to stand up, if you will, completely new supply chains or distribution lanes and everything else as they're, trying to shift to stay alive, if you will, or find new streams of revenue. So I think those are two good examples. I think now, as more and more states are starting to open up a little bit, I think, like to your point, I think we'll start seeing kind of the patterns, begin to change a little bit as well.
One thing I would just add, while Echo and Capital both service large corporations that have, their own logistics departments, many of the customers we serve, they don't have logistics expertise. So when things get a little bit hectic like they are right now and they need to focus on their core business, I think it's been really, nice to see companies step up and be able to help them figure out what creative solutions from a logistics standpoint we can bring to the table to help them, serve their end customers or a new customer base they're now creating a product for.
That's a great point. I want to explore that a little bit later in terms of, what this means moving forward in terms of collaboration between, the different parties here. So let's, I want to get back to that, to that point. Dan, just bring you into the conversation now. Obviously, you work with a lot of different, customers across different companies and industries. I mean, are you seeing that COVID-19 is serving as a catalyst for change and innovation in supply chain logistics? And if so, in what ways?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, obviously, companies like Echo and Capital, I mean, they're market innovators. So these types of disruptions, they're kind of prepared for. We see kind of the long tail of brokers in the space that are moving. I mean, we've kind of gone from what I've seen is fear to focus. So we've moved on, and the human spirit has kicked in to say, what do we need to do to continue to move? And some of it's around, as Jay mentioned, business changes, business model changes. And some of it's really about the technical agility, like Greg had hit on, of being cloud enabled, and really focused on how do we work better with our technology partners to get the right data and do the right things. And more broadly, we've seen some of our tools on the capacity side, which I was surprised have been as popular. So kind of given the current softness in market, we have our broker customers coming to us saying, yeah, but we want to improve the relationships we have with our carrier partners. And with better data, we can have better, smarter conversations and ultimately move transactionally to relationship-based in terms of how we're communicating with our carrier partners. And then finally, I think operationally, trying to take the team that they have in place and give them the tools and innovations to make sure that they can spend less time in the trenches transactionally. And again, like I was saying, more time focused on relationships with their customers and their carrier partners.
Yeah, and I think you raised some great points there. And again, I think it comes down to the fact that all the stakeholders in this industry are connected to one another, right? And you've got the shippers, you've got the brokers and the logistics service providers, and you get the carriers as well, right? And really, at the end of the day, it's balancing, and working together to get through this environment. One of the other things that'd be interesting in your thoughts, I'm seeing a lot of as well is, you're seeing obviously home delivery becoming, that was always a trend that was moving up, but I think this is accelerating that trend to home delivery. And along the same lines, you're seeing things like contactless delivery as something else that you're hearing a lot about. Is that something you're hearing from your customers as well, Dan, in terms of, more home delivery, leveraging technology or innovations around contactless delivery?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we see, again, going back, in business, we use that agility word, but yeah, being able to pivot from modes and industries as volume changes. And I think, Jay, you hit on it, where we're seeing spikes in some areas and less volume in others. We're seeing that in mode shift too, and really giving, companies like Echo and Capital the ability to still deliver on the commitments they make to customers, even as their customers' change in terms of how they engage, purchase, and consume, as we're in a different world now.
Right. Well, to go back to Jay and Greg, and Jay, I'll start with you first, and then Greg, you can answer the same question.
Sure.
So building off the theme of the series, I mean, what does a supply chain for a better tomorrow mean for your company? I mean, in other words, I mean, what supply chain capabilities are you adding or strengthening, whether it's in terms of people, technologies, or services, to not only help you navigate through this crisis, but also to position you and your customers for success for the long term?
Sure. So I think the way I would answer that question, and it's not something that I think we certainly didn't realize this during the COVID time period. This has been an area of focus us for the last few years. We've seen an evolution taking place within the industry. It's often described as the digital freight marketplace, and the way I like to describe that is carriers and brokers and shippers interact throughout the day. There's lots of different areas of the processes within those stakeholder groups that are really, painful, that have a ton of friction, and they're ripe for automation. They're ripe for delivering a better experience to both the Echo employee, but also the stakeholders we deal with within the carrier and the client community. So we're continuing to focus on just our ongoing, digital evolution. And from my standpoint, there's really three pillars that that's focused on. I'd say the first one, and MacroPoint's been Descartes has been a great partner for Echo in this area, is shipment visibility. This has been an ongoing trend over the last 5-6 years. We've certainly seen a ton of progress from my perspective over the last 36 months in terms of adoption, the technology and the integrations really working the way we want them to as end users. So that's going to continue to be a big area of focus. And it's not necessarily about obtaining the data. It's about what we do with that data to make intelligent, forward-looking decisions to help us proactively manage future exceptions. So the second area that we're really focused on is streamlining business operations and communication with our carrier community. And that isn't like a one-size-fits-all approach. Trucking companies span from a single driver in a truck who make a decision to 5,000 truck organizations. That's who Echo deals with, everybody across that spectrum. So we have to have a variety of strategies at place, from a web, mobile app, API integrations that allow us to interact digitally with these carriers. And I'd say one of the areas we've been really focused on over the last 12 months, and certainly an area that we're going to be focused on looking forward, is capacity matching and displaying available loads opportunities to carriers and letting them book freight digitally, but still have that relationship they can rely on at Echo if they have questions, if they have exceptions, or they don't feel comfortable interacting within a website or a mobile app. And then we're also focused on streamlining our interactions with the shipper community, and that could be providing them with instant multimodal pricing through our proprietary platform Echo Ship, through API or EDI integrations, or it could be figuring out new ways of using that rich data that we have from a visibility standpoint, and sharing that information with them to allow them to make proactive decisions. So our efforts really around a better tomorrow are focused around, I'd say, the heavy areas of operations within our business that are often focused on track and trace and exception management, helping carriers find freight more efficiently, and helping shippers gain pricing and access to instant capacity through digital automated channels.
Yeah, those are some great points. I mean, I think, historically, there's been a lot of waste and inefficiency, across the entire end-to-end transportation process, right? A lot of, paper-based systems, a lot of manual processes. So I think one of the things I'm seeing is obviously one of the, talking about how one of the effects of COVID-19 is really, I think, going to accelerate this digital transformation, which is, analysts and folks have been talking about for quite some time. I think that's going to accelerate that in the industry as well. Greg, your thoughts? I mean, what is supply chain for a better tomorrow mean to you? And what are some of the things you're doing to again, not only position, not only help you navigate through this crisis, but also position yourselves and your customers, for future success.
Sure. When I got to Capital, I came and met with the owners, and the mindset was to do things, be on the forefront, make sure that we're taking advantage of what's available to us. We're not builders of technology. We don't hire developers. We don't build platforms. That's not what we do. We're logistics people. We know the logistics business, and that's all we really want to do. So what we like to make sure that we're on top of is what's going on in the industry technologically, making sure, that we're taking our time to learn about what's out there and being put in use, going to trade shows, things like that, learning about, taking advantage of all the API based, companies that are able to tie into Algex. So we're constantly reviewing, trying to improve that. People wise, we're always looking to, add good people to our company, people that understand the industry, people that know what's going on. But mostly, what it means to us is figuring out a way that we can partner with, the good side of the industry. What you see a lot today is, people really trying to take advantage, whether it's the bad shipper taking advantage of the driver, whether it's the bad broker taking advantage of the carriers, or however many times you've heard it in any sort of, forum that's out there, you see what's happening. It's, while we want to do business with a lot of people, we don't have to do business with everyone. And that goes on both sides, both the shipper and the carrier side. And, the way that we look at it, the way that we look at the industry is, we want to treat people fairly. We want to be treated fairly. We want to work with people that are all the same mindset. So bringing everybody together to do this is what's going to, we're hoping to spread that type of culture throughout the industry. Again, we want to be technologically, we want to be as far in the front of the line as we can be, and we'll let other people develop and take advantage and buy those products and use them. We want to be knowledgeable when it comes to logistics and have that technological capability and partner up that way. So that really is the basis of where we're trying to build Capital Logistics and where our mindset is.
Yeah, you raised some great points there. If I heard you correctly, you talk about the importance of relationships, right? Relationships and having the right relationships or alignment between your company and your culture with those of the carriers you want to work with and the shippers you want to work with. And then you also talked about relationships in terms of focusing on your core competencies, but then also relying on partners. In this case, you have Descartes as one of your partners, right? To kind of have them bring the technology capabilities that you're reading about, you're learning about, you're looking to, implement as part of your operations to your point, stay at the forefront of what's happening in the industry. So I think, at the end of the day, it is truly what we've always said in supply chain. It's not just about technology, but it's also about people. It's also about processes as well and relationships. So I think both of you brought up some great, points there. So Dan, kind of similar question, for you. What ultimately, looking forward, what supply chain capabilities will separate the leaders from the laggards in the months and years to come?
Yeah, and I think we've hit on some of these, and Jay kind of outlined that, and both Capital and Echo are good examples where we can be a technology kind of augmenter to the big guys like Echo, and then be some more of a technology platform and back office provider to brokers like Capital. But if I think about kind of the separation of leaders, it's like a lot of industry shocks kind of historically is focus and innovation seem to be kind of the keys to differentiate. And I think kind of breaking that down into three things. First, it's ease of doing business. It's the normal blocking and tackling of a brokerage, making it easier. So getting rid of some of the manual offers and bill of ladings and rate negotiations. How do you automate that to be a better partner in the ecosystem? I think the next piece is the innovation to enable relationship growth. I think there's a lot of talk around freight marketplaces, and I think that's kind of where there are progress towards that, and where we see that is really enabling the marketplace type features to allow relationships to be the differentiator. And then I think the last thing is what we've seen over the last 10 years are the companies that have been successful are the ones that have all the data. The companies I think going forward are going to be the ones that they don't just have the data, but they know how to use it. So, there's private and semi-private and public marketplaces. So, we see in our capacity co-op platform where you have, participants where they're sharing data that they typically underutilize to get a 20, 30x return on data that they can utilize. So innovation is much more around how do we differentiate against the data that a lot of people have versus being kind of the only holders of the data. So certainly interesting times, and I think we'll see a lot of change in terms of market leadership as people really, again, focus on innovation and relationship growth.
Yeah, a lot of great points there. A couple of things that I liked. One is, you talked about, focusing on innovation. I think right now for a lot of companies, and you can make the argument it's the right approach in some ways, is, with business down in many cases and so forth, there's always this tendency when times get tough to kind of tighten the belt and just focus on cost cutting. And then a lot of the innovation and forward-looking things kind of get pushed to the side or get cut and so forth. And I think history has shown that it's those companies that are able to balance, right? You have to control costs in some ways, but you don't do it, at the expense of continuing to innovate and continuing to invest in your people, continuing to invest in the future, right? Because if you do that, if you focus solely on cost right now and cost reduction, and you're ultimately going to put yourself at a disadvantage when the things turn around. So I thought that was that was a great point there. Just so, as a way to wrap up, and Greg, I'm going to go to you first, and then Jay, you can wrap things up for us here. Just to go to the last question, I think we've kind of touched upon this, already a little bit, but I think I think it's a good kind of ending question. Is a popular phrase we're hearing a lot right now is we're in this together. And that's certainly true for shippers, logistics service providers, and technology companies. How do you see these relationships evolving, moving forward? In other words, do you see the industry becoming more collaborative and partnership focused moving forward?
I do. I see, one of the points that Dan had made with the flow of information, making it easy to do business with, that's really, it needs to become easier, even if there's, something as easy as standardized type of paperwork. It's just the flow of information needs to be better. There's so many instances where, the driver, the dispatcher didn't get the information to the driver shows up, he doesn't have the right pickup number, and all these things that take the time and delay it and get, humans that are on the floor actually doing these things upset. So, doing what we can do to get correct information as rapidly as possible, and sharing information between shippers, brokers, carriers, I think that's going to be, some of the things that you're going to see taking the industry to the next level. And the companies that are doing that, the companies that are doing things well, those are the companies that you're going to see succeed. Those are the companies that gain the word of mouth in the carrier community. Capital is doing it right. They're paying fair rates. They're giving you the right information. Their pickups are solid. Their delivery appointments are actually legitimate. All those things, carriers talk. You can go on Facebook and look at these carrier forums, and, some of these companies get blasted. Some of these companies get praised, and, it's out there. Technology, it's a different world. It's like I tell my wife when we talk about our kids, it's like we didn't grow up with a computer in our pocket. We have a completely different world to control. And that's everywhere. That's not just my family. That's every day that we go to work. So, it's a brave new world, and it's an even newer world now. I'll call it mid-pandemic. I'm not going to call it post-pandemic yet.
Yeah, no, great points. And I think, you hear a lot of things, historically you've heard about being a shipper of choice. You've heard about, now you also hear about being a broker of choice, right? For the carriers, right? You talk about competing on customer experience on the shipper side, right? And retail side, but you're also competing on carrier experience, right? So you as a shipper or a carrier, are you providing that carrier with the experience that they're expecting, right? So I think that all boils down to everything you guys just talked about in terms of what's going to position everyone for success here. It really boils down to, treating everyone fairly, treating it, providing that level of transparency everybody, expects, and good level of honest communication, between all the parties. Jay, to wrap us up here, your thoughts on, collaboration and partnership moving forward.
I certainly think it's an ongoing trend that we'll continue to see, occur within the industry, likely expedite over the next, 12 to 18 months. You just made a comment about, transparency and how some of these digital platforms are bringing more transparency to the industry. I really think that that's going to be one of the mechanisms that really powers, future collaboration. So, from my standpoint, this business is going to continue to be very, relationship focused. And as I think about how our teams at Echo spend their time with the carriers and the clients that we support, I actually think it's going to be even more of a relationship focus as we move into the future, because a lot of the mundane operational tasks we ask them to do throughout the day are going to be, digitized. The days of answering a phone call and being asked where a driver is are going away, because you can log into a portal and see that information, now. So that time, all of those phone calls that people used to spend supporting these operational requests of their clients can now be focused on building deeper relationships, better understanding their business, figuring out ways to use data to bring new solutions to the table. And, I really believe that that combination of technology, relationship, and ability to create actionable insights off of data is going to be like the winning recipe as we think forward about how a 3PL and a carrier and a 3PL and a customer build meaningful partnerships.
Great. Well, I think all great points. And again, I think this has been a great conversation. I feel like we could probably talk for another, hour or so on this topic. And there's so many different dimensions that we can go into, but I think you provided some great insights and advice and food for thought for our listeners out there. So, Jay, Greg, and Dan, thank you all for, making the time to be with us, particularly in, this very busy, time period for all of you. I want to thank those of you that joined us. If you're watching this episode on demand, either at the Descartes website or on Talking Logistics, and you've got a question or a comment for any of the speakers, you can post it there, and I'm sure they'll be more than happy to get back to you that way. Again, thank you for joining us, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.
Thanks for having us.
Great. Thanks, Adrian.